Hello and welcome to another video from Colour with Claire. Today we're going to be looking at pan pastel skin tones. So just in case you're not familiar with pan pastels, this is what they look like. Some of them come in the big palette, the big plastic palette like this, so they're all sat in there ready to use. But you can also get them individually, and when they come individually they look like this, and on the back they have their colour name and number. And you can also get lids for them as well, so you don't have to have them in this palette setup. You can have the lid on them and have them individually dotted around your desk or whatever you like to, wherever you like to arrange them. You can even screw them together so that you can get one long row of pan pastels like this, and you can take them out and about with you. So if you have a set of 5 or 6 that you want to take around, you can screw them all together. You don't have to worry about lids, and they'll all stay together. So what are pan pastels? Well, they are very, very high quality artists' pastels. So we've all heard of chalk pastel backgrounds and things like that, and usually you have the little sticks of chalk pastel, what you maybe rub a Q-tip on or scrape off with a little craft knife a bit of the dust and rub it around with cotton wool. Well, these are very akin to that, but on a much higher grade. So these are made with superior pastel pigments, and they're really, really bright. You don't need a lot whatsoever, which is kind of contrasting to what you would find with normal pastel sticks, chalk pastels, because it seems like you need a heck of a lot of that pastel to build up the colour, whereas this is completely the opposite. You need the lightest touch and you'll get a very, very strong level of pigment. They're also pretty much dust free, which is another problem with chalk pigments, but I'm not going to go into a huge review of pan pastel because I did that a few years ago on my blog, which I'll link to in the description. Today we're just looking at skin tones and seeing if we can emulate skin tones properly, and if we can get them looking smooth, and just test them out really, see what we can do with them. So the set that I've got here, 7 of them actually came as the skin tone set, and a few of them, like the lavender and this yellow ochre here, are ones that I've added in from my personal collection because I thought that they would go really nicely with the skin tones. I use a lot of lavender on skin tones when I'm colouring with pencil to do the shadowing, so I thought that that would come in really handy. And again, there's just a few others that I've picked that I thought would complement each other. So just looking now at the colours that we've actually got here, I'm just going to push them all in, make sure they're not going to fall out on me when we turn the palette over. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put the palette lid on. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? Okay, so on the back we've got all of our colours. So we've got red iron oxide tint, and we've got red iron oxide. We've got yellow ochre tint and the yellow ochre. We have the magenta tint, which was the very, very light pink that you saw, which would be really good for blush. We've got burnt sienna shade, burnt sienna extra dark, and burnt sienna. We then have the burnt sienna tint, and lastly we have that violet tint. So we've got a lot of burnt siennas on here, and I'll just explain that a little bit. So if you watch my colour wheel video, you may have learnt the difference between tints, tones and shades. So the tone is the, hang on, let me get this right. the shade rather is where you add black to the original colour. The tint is where you add white, and then you've got the original colour of the burnt sienna there. So we've got original burnt sienna, we've got the shade where we add black to the burnt sienna, and we've got the tint where we add white to the burnt sienna. And there's even burnt sienna extra dark that they've added in there just for more shadows and contrast. So that's all the colours that we've got to play with today. I also should mention that there is a white pan pastel here, should we need to add any highlights, creamy highlights. And you can also get the Colorless Blender, which of course is the same kind of stuff that they use inside the pans, but it has no pigment to it, so we can use that to blend. Also, when you buy pan pastels, they come with something like this. This is the soft tools that come with the pan pastels. They come in all different shapes and sizes. This is just the set that I got with these skin tones. So here we've got the long knife, like a palette knife, and it has a sponge end on it for you to do some blending, get into some quite tight spaces. We also have this slanted oval large sponge on this long rectangular one as well, and some more of those spare pads for the knife. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swatch all these out first of all, because we need to know exactly what colours we're dealing with. So I'm going to take out, I think we'll go with this one. I'm going to take off that lid. And pull this down a little bit so we can see our paper. And let's do a bit of a swatch and see what we've got. So I'm going to start off with the lightest tone. We're going to go with this one over here, hopefully you can see. And this, I believe, is that burnt sienna tint. So we've not got a lot on there whatsoever. I've just swiped it over a couple of times. Let me zoom in so you can see. And we have a really opaque coverage there, as you can see. So you do not need a lot, and there's barely any dust on this. Completely different to how you would find normal chalk pastels. So next up we're going to try the, we'll go in order actually, let's go in order. So we have the burnt sienna itself. So I've put a little bit on there like that, as you can see. And then we're just swiping it down so that you can see the swatch that we have created there. And you can see that that is a very much darker version of this. So they're all in the same colour family, which is really going to help with our seamless blending. We're then going to go on to the burnt sienna tone, or shade rather, do get mixed up. This is the burnt sienna shade, so the one with the black added. You can see much, much darker. And then finally, the extra dark burnt sienna. Which is very, very dark, almost black. So that is going to be a brilliant tone, skin tone. That's going to, well, hopefully should be really, really smooth and seamless. So next up, we're going to go with our Iron Oxides. So starting with the red Iron Oxide tint. Oh, got a little bit of the burnt sienna on there. But you can see that that is very similar to the sienna, it's just got a lot more of a peach, pinky peach tone in it. So I'm going to have to be careful now with these sponges, that's the thing. You should use different sponges really for different colour families, and you can wash these so they are reusable. Let's try and scrape off a little bit of that, because I'm getting all kinds of colours now on this sponge. Okay, hopefully that's going to be clean enough. Now we move on to the red Iron Oxide itself. And we'll put that alongside the tint so that you can see the difference there. Now I'm going to turn my sponge around so that we've got a clean edge to carry on with, but just look here while I'm swiping out the excess, just how much pigment there is. Just by swiping just a couple of times on that pan, you're getting so much pigment, it is incredible. Okay, next up, this one here, which I believe was the yellow ochre tint. Just check, yep. So we've got the yellow ochre tint. Just a couple of swipes, just a bit there, probably done too much to be honest. And then swipe it down, and there we have our yellow ochre tint. Then with the yellow ochre itself, there we are. Now we've got two more colours left I think, and that is some of the ones that I added, which was the violet tint or the lavender tint and the magenta tint. So just very carefully, just going to smush off some of the excess there. It's all blending in together, which is I guess what we want to see. And then I'll use this other side. So here we have that magenta tint, lovely blush colour there. And then try and use this side of the sponge, we have that lavender tint. There we go. So I think you'd agree that that is a really decent starter palette for skin tones, and I think we're going to be able to get a lot of different ones out of that as well. This violet I think is really going to help, especially on these lighter skin tones with the shadows, and yeah, just absolutely love them so far. And you can just see how much excess you get from just a few little swipes, so you're getting an awful lot of actual product for your money. So now that we've swatched them out, we're going to see how they blend. So I'm going to move this up a little bit, and then hopefully we'll be able to try out a blend. So I'm going to get some of the Iron Oxide tint, the red Iron Oxide tint, and just put it down here. I'm then going to turn this around and grab some of that darker colour, the darker red Iron Oxide, and put it right next to it, right on top of it. And let's see how we can blend them on their own first of all, without the Colorless Blender. So I'm simply just rubbing the sponge over these two colours. And yes, you will get a slight bit of dust, of course you will, but it's nothing compared to standard chalk pastels. Now, literally all I'm doing is rubbing, it was a clean side of the sponge, over those two together. And as you can see, it's pretty much seamless already. We've got a bit of a darker patch over here, but they have blended together really, really well. Let's try that again with a couple of the other colours. So I'm going to go with the darker, the ochres, I think, the burnt ochres. So if it's a darker colour, you can use the same side of the sponge. So we're going to start with that burnt ochre tint. Let's move this up a little bit. I'm going to put some of that on there, still getting a little bit of the red because I'm not using a different sponge. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use a different sponge. Give me a sec, guys. I really don't want this to taint the review because I know how good these PanPastels are. So let me get hold of the other sponge. Right, so we've got the other sponge now. So let's try again up here. Now, just cleaning off that pan a little bit because we have a little bit of residue. As you can see, a slight bit of residue there. So cleaning off the pan with my finger, and here we go. So, burnt ochre tint. Then, burnt ochre. Then burnt ochre tone or shade, might be shade, I can never remember the order, and then that extra dark burnt ochre as well. So we've got all the four colours sort of overlapping each other there. Let's use a unmarked side of the sponge to blend them all together. So I'm doing a very light circular motion over the whole lot. It takes no effort whatsoever to blend these together. Now I'm wondering how the Colorless Blender would make a difference to this, so I really want to try that as well in this demonstration. Don't forget, this is new to me as well, guys. Even though I have had PanPastel in the past, I have never ever tried skin tone with it, so this is new to me. So I'm going to go again with the exact same colours we've just used, and then we're going to blend them with the Colorless Blender. So we have a bit of the tint, the burnt ochre itself, a bit more of that I think. The let me just check whether it's tone or shade. It's shade. The burnt ochre shade, a bit more, and the extra dark burnt ochre. There we go. So now I'm bringing in this Colorless Blender. Let's crack this open, and we'll use a clean side of the sponge for this as well. So just wiping over the Colorless Blender, it will have some powder colour, some white colour to it. but there's no actual pigment inside. So I'm just wiping that over. Wow, that's even better than me just doing it with the sponge. So it really fades out the colour and gives it a nice gradation. And I suppose you can put as much of this on as you want, just keep going over until you've got it as smooth as you want it. Obviously when we're working on a smaller area, we are going to be doing things quite differently. This is just for demonstration purposes, these quite large areas. So there we go, that's the difference between just using your sponge and using the Colorless Blender. So obviously it does desaturate it a little bit when you do that. You can also use the white if you want to. And what I might do is just crack this white open and go over these swatches with it just to see what effect it has. So we have the white. I can imagine it being very, very similar to the Colorless Blender, but we'll see. So we have the white. I'm just going to go straight over these here. And I've got some dust coming off my my sponge there from the very dark ochre. And just more white. Again, we're just desaturating the tone, aren't we, really? But I think either the Colorless Blender or the white are really good options to use for blending. I would say though that looking at this, I can still see the quite definite swatch underneath here. So maybe that's what the Colorless Blender does best. It just gets rid of any lines or harshness. So there we are. There is our little demonstration. Now, of course, we're going to try and do a skin tone in a colouring book with these. So join me in a moment when I've cleaned up and I've got a book sorted out, and we will see how we go. Okay, so this is the illustration that I've chosen for the PanPastel skin tutorial. I have coloured all of it in, as you can see, apart from the skin. And if you want to see how I coloured this hair, you can watch the live stream of me actually doing this whole head of hair fully live and in real time, and you can see how to do it. So I'm super, super nervous about this because I really love how this colouring came out. So I'm kind of worried about messing it up, but it's going to be one of those things. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So we will see. Now I've got all of my soft tools ready here. So I've got one for each shade that I'm going to be using, which I think is probably the best thing to do. I'm going to leave the little one, the little precision one, for the very darkest colour because we don't need a lot of that. And I think I'll start by putting down a base layer of the lightest colour, which is this one here. The Burnt Ochre Tint, I think it's called. Burnt Sienna Tint. So we're working with the Burnt Siennas. So just putting some on my palette brush there. So you can see that it's now got a good thick layer of that colour on. And here we go. So I'm putting this base layer down. Now don't forget that you can erase these really, really well. So if you do mess up, it is really easy to just get your rubber out or your eraser and get rid of any mistakes. So I'm taking it very slow, as you can see, because I'm super worried about getting this wrong, or, you know, when it's your first time doing something, it's just a little bit concerning that you'll get it wrong, especially because I'm really pleased with how the pictures turned out, so I don't want to muck it up. So I'm just doing a base layer of this. And like I said, if it goes over anything, any of your previous coloured pencil work, it's all good. You can just erase it. If you've got a precision eraser, that's even better. Like this one here. This is the Tombow Mono eraser and it's tiny. So you can get rid of any bits and bobs if you go wrong. I'm going to concentrate on the face first to get that right, hopefully, and then we'll move on to the sort of the neckline and everything. So I've put down a layer use my dusting brush. Now I'm going to go to the next darkest colour and use another tool for that, and the next one is this one here, the burnt sienna. So I'm going to try just a little bit on the tip of the tool first, as you can see there. Could do with a piece of kitchen roll or something to wipe any excess onto, but I'll just see if I can just use a piece of paper just to wipe excess. Haven't got any kitchen roll on me at the moment. Now, thinking about when I do coloured pencil skin, I'm just thinking where I normally put shadows and things. So let's do a bit down here. I could do with a few of those precise tools really, just to get the lines in, because it's quite a fat sponge, this one. So I'm doing it really lightly as well. And of course we're going to be blending this in with the Colorless Blender. Or even just with the lightest shade that we've used. That might be a better idea. Okay. So we've got some basic cheek shadowing in there. I'm going to try a little bit up here around the hairline. And down the nose, the lines of the nose. This is so scary. It's looking okay so far though. We just need to obviously blend out a lot, but put a little bit here. Okay, so not bad so far. I'm going to put a little bit underneath the bottom lip. And a bit just on the edges of the nose here. Very difficult really with these larger sponges. So we've got the main contours done, I think. I'm going to do just a little bit over the lashes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back in with my original tool with the first colour and try and blend it out a bit. So we're going in with the tint to go over top of what we've just done. So that blends out really nicely actually. See, it's got a lot softer than it is on this side, which is quite harsh. Rosie? Suppose he's seen a bird or something outside. So even though I was fairly worried about this, as each second goes on, I'm actually getting more comfortable with the medium. Now that I can see that it blends really nicely and we haven't got a harshness there, I'm feeling a lot better about this. Excuse me. So obviously I'm doing this in real time so that you can see properly how it's done rather than speeding it up, because I know that I would want to see that, and if it was sped up, I'd probably be a bit concerned that I wasn't doing exactly the right steps or what have you. And I know it might be boring because there's no music, or it's, you know, this is a very long portion of the video, but I thought it'd be worth it so that you can see. So again, all I'm doing is using the original colour, the burnt sienna tint, to go over those darker lines that we've done and blend them into the face a bit more. Now up here, I definitely want that lighter, that area. So I may go in with an eraser or the white, because I think I've just gone a bit too far there. So that's our second layer of pan pastel done. I'm really pleased with how that looks. It's very soft. Okay, so I'm going to get that white and just cover up that area a little. Let's try first of all to erase it. Just making sure that my eraser is nice and clean, because we don't want any marks. Just going to erase a little bit. Might even be worth getting a kneadable eraser and just picking up some of that pigment. Then I'm going to put a bit of white just on my finger and smooth that in. There we go. Much better. Now we could leave it like that, but me being me, I want to deepen up those shadows. So I'm going to go in with a slightly darker colour. This is the burnt sienna shade, this one here. I'm just getting a very small amount on the tip of my tool. Just going to tap it off onto a piece of paper, make sure we haven't got too much. And then again, very carefully going over this line. You know what? I've actually changed my mind. I'm going to use the precision tool for that one. So here we go. Because I just don't think that that other one is as skinny as I need it to be to get the line right. I bet you can feel the concentration going into this, that's why I'm so quiet. Just really want to try and get this right. just defining the cheekbones a little bit more. And around this hairline a little bit. But leaving the top of the nose part white. Do a little bit there. And a little bit on those areas of the nose, the nostrils, just for extra definition. Okay, now what I'm going to do is go back in with the burnt sienna itself. Don't want too much on my tool, because at this stage we're just using the slightest fraction of pastel just to blend. And then with the original tint, just dabbing on a bit of that colour, and we'll go over everything. So I think that's looking pretty good for a first attempt. I'm going to get some of that white back and just do some highlights. So I'm using my finger for this and just putting it, some of the highlight back in at the top of the nose there and down the front of the nose, and a little bit under the eyes. I'm just using another finger to go over the lines. Obviously make sure your hands are clean. Put a bit of white on the inner eyelids, so that in the centre portion of the eyelids. And a slight bit just on the edges of the jaw. And I think I'm going to say that that's done. The lines around the nose are a little bit haphazard, so maybe I'll just clean them up a little bit with the white and possibly just redefine them very slightly with the burnt sienna colour. But for a first attempt, I'm actually pretty pleased with how this has turned out. I don't know what you guys think. You have to let me know in the comments. So I'm just mucking about a little bit, trying to get it to look how I want it, but yeah, pretty pleased. So we're going to move on to the neck and the chest in a moment, which should hopefully be just as easy, really. I'm not sure why I was so worried. I think it's just because I really like this picture and I didn't want to mess it up. Okay, so we'll move on to the chest. Now I'm going to do what I did before, which was do a layer of the tint, just tap it off onto the paper and just do a flat layer with that. You know what we could also do is do a little bit of pink on those cheeks. This little pink here. Just pop a little bit of that in. Give it a bit of a lift. Just on the apples of her cheeks. Might not make too much difference to you on camera there, but it looks pretty good here to my eye. There we go. Yes, let's carry on with this. So there's a lot of kind of little bits and bobs here that we need to get around, which is kind of annoying, but we'll just take our time. This will be a long video. Probably should have warned you at the start of the video that this is going to be a bit of a long one. But I really just wanted you to go through this process with me and for the first time, and just see that I'm not confident with things, and you know, I'm not a pro. So down here we've also got the arms as well. I'm just covering the whole thing. Again, we can erase this so it goes out the lines. It's super easy to erase. Must keep remembering to use the brush, not my hands. And then we've got this bit of her midriff under here, and a bit of bust showing. Okay, so there's an area here where I've done some erasing and it's kind of lifted up the tooth of the paper a little bit, so that might be a bit rough, that area, but we'll just work with it, see what happens. So moving to the burnt sienna, getting a bit on the tool and just tapping it off onto a piece of paper so we haven't got too much excess. Now then, I'm going to do underneath the chin and along these collarbones. and I think down the sides here and underneath these ribbons. Just thinking where to put this. Let's put a little bit in the centre of the bust here. Just defining that. And giving them a bit of shape. And maybe a touch just down here. So I'm getting slightly more confident with it now because I know that we can blend out fairly easily any areas that I'm not happy with. Okay, and then on the arms, I'm just going to go underneath this frilly area of the top, which I've tried to make see-through. I don't know whether that's apparent to you, but I've tried to make it a sheer fabric. And then a little bit underneath this bust, and in here I think a little bit, and underneath this kind of bow in the middle. Right, so going back to the initial tint, we're going to try and blend this out. Probably will come back and do a bit of shading inside that necklace, the ribbons there. But for now, I just want to try and get the main areas right. Okay, so I've done my second layer, which was going back to the original, sorry, third layer now, isn't it? Going back to the original tint colour that we did the skin with. And I think that's looking pretty good so far. Now we have to go in with the scary dark colour, scary to me anyway, and do a few little shadows so we can get it looking the same sort of tone as the face. So starting with under the chin. And under these ribbons. What might be easier to use for these little areas is maybe a pointed Q-tip. You can get those ones that are actually tapered to a point. That might be easier. Really would recommend, by the way, getting one of these dust brushes. You can get them from Amazon, they're only a few pounds. But it's just better, I think, than using your hand to swipe over it and getting all that contamination of colour everywhere. Okay, so that's our darker areas done. Let's go back in with the burnt sienna, do a little bit of blending. And we're starting to get to the similar kind of tone as the face. I'll probably be adding some white in some highlight areas. I imagine using a clean sponge as well to just blur your lines a little bit would work. Okay, so original brush into that burnt sienna tint and blend everything out. This is my favourite bit because we don't have to be careful. You might need to wipe off your tool every so often because it is going to be picking up the darker colours as we go along. I really like how soft it turns out in the end once you've started to blend it, because it can look a little bit rough and linear beforehand, and then you've got these beautiful blends that manage to appear once you kind of stroke on either the Colorless Blender or the first initial colour that you used in this case. Might just pop a few little darker areas inside this ribbon. Pretty happy with that so far. got some of the pastel on my coloured pencil work, so you can use your finger just to rub that off a little bit, or as I say, an eraser. Now I'm going to go in again with the white with my finger, making sure it's nice and clean. Yeah. And then just doing a few highlights on this chest area. Just going to redefine that boob a little bit because it's looking a bit wonky. Still looks a bit wonky, but hey ho, they're all wonky, aren't they? They're wonky anyway. Right, making sure we've got some white highlights in here. Ooh, a lot of pastel on the bottom there for some reason. So we've got highlights on the arms. And a little bit on the bottom here as well. Even though it's a small area, we don't want it to be all one block colour. Might just put a little bit more ochre in here. Just so it matches the shadows, the rest of the shadows. It's looking a little bit pale. So, looking at it all now, I think I'm going to call it done. Might just put a little bit more shadow just underneath this chin, but I think basically we've done it. Phew! I'm so glad that that actually turned out okay. You can't imagine, because I spent so much time colouring the dress and the hair and everything. I'm really, really pleased that we've actually made a good go with these pan pastels. So obviously we need, you know, an eraser or whatever. I've got a bit of one of these kneaded erasers here, so I can just go on and get rid of all these bits that have come off the edge, because like I say, pastel's really easy to remove, so there's no worries there. And yes, that is us done. I think what I'm going to do is, just to finish her off, put a little bit of stickles on that gem that she's got hanging from her ribbon there, but other than that, that's it. So I really hope that you have got something out of this video and it's not just been a long and laborious watch for you while I've been trying my best not to muck it up with these pan pastels. And let me know what you think about using pan pastels for skin tone. You can see that you can get a really, really smooth finish. And it's not too hard. I know I made it sound a bit scary, but it's actually not. So I will be using this medium in future, definitely with more confidence now than I did before. things blend a lot better than you think they're going to blend, so don't worry if it looks too dark or too harsh. If you just put either the Colorless Blender or, like I did, the very first colour that you put down on the skin, just over it, and keep swiping it over, keep blending it, you are going to end up with a really nice smooth result. So just finishing off with my eraser, just picking up a bit of that pastel that's gone on my coloured pencil work. There we are. There she is, complete. So again, please leave me a comment in the box below if you've enjoyed this video, and also don't forget to click the thumbs up because that's super important. And if you want to see more videos like this, live streams, tutorials, book reviews, colouring, all sorts of different things, please do subscribe to the channel, because this is what I love to do best, is to teach you guys and learn with you. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you soon on Colour with Claire.